Every July 18th, people in over 170 countries pause to do something surprisingly small: 67 minutes of service to someone else. Not a donation drive, not a speech, just 67 minutes handed over to somebody who needs it. That number isn't random, and neither is the date. Both come from the life of one man who spent decades proving that a single person's choices can genuinely reshape a country. This is Nelson Mandela International Day. Nelson Mandela was born in 1918 in a small village in South Africa. He trained as a lawyer at a time when the country's apartheid system legally separated people by race and denied black South Africans basic rights, from where they could live to who they could vote for. Mandela joined the resistance movement against that system early, and over the following decades, he became one of its most recognized leaders, which is exactly what put him in the government's crosshairs. In 1962, Mandela was arrested. 2 years later, he was sentenced to life in prison for his role in the resistance movement, much of it spent on Robben Island, a small island prison off the coast of Cape Town. He would remain behind bars for 27 years, and here's the detail that made him different from almost anyone else in that position. He came out the other side without spending that time plotting revenge. He came out talking about reconciliation. When Mandela finally walked free in February 1990, South Africa was still deeply divided, still years away from real democracy. He could have used that moment to settle scores. Instead, he spent the next 4 years doing something almost nobody expected: negotiating directly with the very government that had imprisoned him to try to build a peaceful transition instead of a civil war. In 1994, South Africa held its first election open to all races. Nelson Mandela won, becoming the country's first democratically elected president. He served a single term, then stepped down voluntarily, a choice that, on a continent where many leaders clung to power indefinitely, sent its own quiet message. Power, to him, was never supposed to be permanent. It was supposed to be useful and then handed off. In November 2009, the United Nations General Assembly officially declared July 18th, Mandela's birthday, as Nelson Mandela International Day. The first observance took place the following year, in 2010. But the UN made a deliberate choice about what this day would actually be. Not a holiday, not a ceremony. A global call to service built directly around something Mandela said himself in the years before his death, that it was now in everyone else's hands to keep doing the work. That 67-minute tradition comes from simple math. It represents the 67 years Mandela spent in public service, from his early activism in 1942 all the way through his presidency and beyond. The idea is straightforward. If he gave 67 years, the least the rest of us can give is 67 minutes, not as a substitute for bigger change, as a starting point for it. This year's Mandela Day theme leans directly on his own words, that it's still in our hands to build a better world, especially for the poor, the vulnerable, and the marginalized. In a year shaped by rising division and widening inequality in many parts of the world, the message is less about looking back at what Mandela did and more about asking what we're each willing to do right now in our own neighborhoods with the time we actually have. So what does 67 minutes actually look like? It's rarely dramatic. It's dropping off food at a local shelter. It's tutoring a kid who's behind in reading. It's cleaning up a park nobody else has gotten around to. It's sitting with someone who's lonely and just listening. Mandela Day organizers are intentional about this. The goal was never a single flashy event once a year. It's using this day as the spark for something people keep doing long after July 18th ends. Mandela's influence didn't stop at this one day either. In 2015, the UN renamed its global standards for humane prison conditions the Nelson Mandela Rules, directly honoring the 27 years he spent behind bars and using his experience to push for more humane treatment of prisoners everywhere. It's a small but telling example of how deeply his story reshaped conversations about justice well beyond South Africa's borders. On July 18th, the ask is small on purpose, 67 minutes. Somebody near you who could use it. Mandela spent 27 years in a cell and came out asking people to build, not to settle scores. That alone should tell you what this day is really about. It's not really about looking back at one man's life. It's about whether the rest of us pick up where he left off. If this helped you understand the day a little better, hit subscribe. We break down a new global observance every week.